Alrighty, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our parent cafe tonight. Little children, big emotions. So thank you guys for coming. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Nathan and allow him to go ahead and take over the host abilities and share his slides with us tonight.
All right, thank you, Spencer.
Very welcome.
Yeah, so my name is Nathan. I work at Nexus Youth and Family Services. I'm one of the therapists there. So let me just share my screen and I will be able to start off this presentation. All right, so little kids, big emotions. That's kind of what we're going to be focusing on today, of course, as you know. So first, I just wanted to introduce a little bit about myself. I'm a newlywed. That is my beautiful wife in the picture right there. Just got married in May. I have some experience working with kids and families in a wide variety of settings. From schools to ministry to community outreach, and now in the therapy setting. So, currently completing my master's in counseling psychology, and like I said, one of the therapists at Nexus. So, let me move on. There we go. So, what I really want to start out with is just with a little disclaimer. As we talk about kids and the full range of their emotional experience, I understand that it's probably going to be pretty hard a lot of the time, right? It's going to be moments where you feel defeated, moments where you just feel exhausted, and moments where you might just look at your child and be like, what is going on? Why are you acting this way? Why are you having this emotional experience? And I just wanted to be able to tell you up front that it's normal for you and for your child to experience big emotions, right? So there's nothing wrong with you as a parent, as a guardian, and there's nothing wrong with your child. So some children have more difficulty regulating their emotions than others. So I just wanted to start off with a kind of quirky example from my own experience. A few years ago, I was an intern at an elementary school in Roseville, and I was helping a whole class move from their classroom out to the playground. And this was a class of kindergartners, so I think the age range was close to 4, 5, 6. And I was walking this class over, and I saw that there was a little boy who was behind a little girl. The girl had long hair, and I noticed that the boy just grabbed a fistful of her hair, put it in his mouth, and just started chowing down. And so, as the aide, I came in and I stopped it, and I told him, I was like, "Hey, like, we actually can't be doing that. Like, that's not really okay." And he said, "I'm just so sorry, Mr. Nathan. I'm just really hungry." And I told him, I totally understand, but hair is not for eating. We need to treat each other with respect. And he didn't like that. He had a full on meltdown on the ground, screaming, crying temper tantrum. And when I was thinking about the content for, this presentation, I think my mind immediately went to that image of a young child who wanted something ridiculous and then had a really disproportionate response to that thing, to not getting what they wanted. And I think it's just so common for us to see these tiny little kids with these emotions that are completely explosive. And we as adults who are no longer in that child brain just feeling completely hopeless or at least unequipped to be able to deal with that. So really today, I just want to be able to inform you, to be able to just give you a little bit of information about kids, but then also to be able to hopefully give you some useful tools to be able to help kids handle their emotions. So I will now go on to the next slide. So, what do big emotions look like? I'm gonna just let someone into the room really quick. Admit. So, what do big emotions look like? So, obviously, most of us have at least seen a child with this. If not, you have a child who's done some of these things, crying, yelling, hitting, even giggling, anxiety, sadness, disgust, fatigue. Like, this is the full emotional range of children, right? And really, these emotions are not different than ours, the ones that we have as adults. But really, for kids, they're dialed up to 10, right? If they're sad, they are sobbing, they're crying, they've got lots of tears, maybe they're screaming. If they are afraid, they're hiding under a table. If they're angry, they're punching, right? Whereas we as adults, usually we can self regulate, we can understand what uh, a reasonable response is to some sort of stressor, and kids don't really have that, right? So big emotions for them really just look different than they do for us. We all have experiences, firsthand experiences of what these emotions look like for these kids. And a lot of the time, these vary from child to child. You can't necessarily generalize about what any particular kid is going to be experiencing emotionally. All right. So, of course, the big question is why? Why do kids experience these wild mood swings, these explosive reactions to things that we would think are really just not a big deal? Are they born this way, or are they products of their environment? Is kind of the question behind the question. Is it biology or is it environment? Is it nature or is it nurture? And I know people on both sides of this argument that bring lots of research and bring lots of facts and make great arguments. But the reality is, it's probably a little bit of both. So, first, to address the biological aspect of children and their emotions, we have to look at the developing brain. So, I provided just a really basic picture right here of the three main parts of the brain. There are different words for these parts of the brain. You can call it the cortex, the cerebrum, the cerebellum, the brainstem. But for today, I think it's easier to just think of it as the hindbrain, which is kind of the lower part, the midbrain, which is the middle, and the forebrain, which is kind of the top and the front. Okay, because each parts of the brain have different functions, and the brain develops in a particular way. So, really, pretty much everyone, their brain develops from the bottom up. All right. So, from the hindbrain to the midbrain, and the forebrain is last. And so, the hindbrain, the most important part of that is the brainstem. So, the brainstem is involved with pretty much all of the automatic processes of our body. So, when we think about, breathing, when we think about our nervous system, and just our movement, and just all the things that we don't necessarily need to control, but the things that help us survive. That's all the brainstem, and that's the first part of the brain to develop. Um, a newborn is born and the brainstem is ready to go, right? Its lungs are working, it's able to move and have reflexes. And that's why it's the first one to develop, because the baby needs to survive. Uh, After that is developed, then the midbrain starts to develop, right? And that's, within the first year, 2 or 3 of life. And so by the time they're 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, that midbrain is really starting to fire. And the midbrain is involved with all of the emotional responses that a person experiences. So anger, aggression, fear, sadness, all of this is a part of the midbrain. Oh, I'm just gonna let one more person in. And so when we think about fight or flight, that's the midbrain. So when you encounter something that is stressful in your environment, some sort of stimulus that either causes fear or aggression, that's the midbrain. that develops after the brainstem. But guess what has not developed yet? The forebrain, aka the prefrontal cortex, the very front part of the brain, the last part to develop, is the one that is involved in critical thinking and problem solving and logic and reasoning. So when you think about a 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old child, that forebrain is nowhere close to being developed. And so when they encounter something that is stressful in their environment, no matter what that is, whether it's an objectively small deal or an objectively big deal, that cortex is not powerful enough to override whatever emotion they are feeling. So when it's anger, when it's sadness, when it's joy, those feelings are unbridled because they're in control. That this part of the brain is not yet ready to be in control, but the part in the middle sure is. So that's just a little background for that part. But then environment also plays a part. So research has shown that children are less likely to regulate emotions when their environment is unstable, unpredictable, or unsupportive. So, when a kid is experiencing these big emotions or having a really difficult time regulating, we can't just chalk it up to, oh, well, they're just born that way. They're just wired that way. Because that's really not painting a full picture. There might be some sort of um, you know biologically based difficulty that they're experiencing. That totally could be a possibility, but they don't really have a chance if their environment is not working for them. So what does it mean for an environment to be unstable or unpredictable or unsupportive? For a lot of these kids, it could mean no schedule or no routine. I think that's one of the things that I've seen in my practice that is one of the most overlooked helpful aspects of a child's environment. When there is no stability or when there is no consistency or anything that they know is going to happen throughout the day, emotionally, that can really take a toll and make them dysregulated. Another thing would be a guardian who's emotionally unavailable, someone who isn't there to listen to them or to try to at least have a back and forth about a way that they're feeling. Or, as difficult as it might be to imagine, a parent who just doesn't care. That can really take a toll. Um, Fun and play are also the first language of any child. So if they are raised or consistently in an environment where there is no fun and where there is no play, that is also going to take a toll. Like I said, lack of consistency can really be hard for children to overcome because a chaotic environment around them is going to result in chaos in their inner being. A lack of boundaries is also huge. We'll talk a little bit more about boundaries a little bit later, but uh, boundaries are really where there is a yes and where there is a no. Okay, and so boundaries, if they're not clear, a lot of the time it's not going to help a child regulate because it just increases that instability and that chaotic nature. And then, of course, if there is abuse or if there is trauma, those are things that are going to be uh, really going to take a toll on the child emotionally. And so you'll definitely see some dysregulation if there is any kind of history of abuse or trauma. Okay. So that's a lot of background just as far as, um, why children experience those emotions and what it looks like, why it happens. But I'm sure that anyone who is watching now or who will be watching the recording, I'm sure that you popped on here thinking, well, what can I do? You're looking for tools, you're looking for something to be able to take home. So I want to be able to give you at least a little bit of advice and guidance in that. So I have four kind of broad categories, and then I'll list some examples within these categories. But really, I think part of it is you're going to need to find something that works for your child because you know them best and they have their own unique personality traits and needs. So within those four categories, maybe you'll find something that I didn't list, something that'll work really well for them. So the first one, as I'm sure you put together already from my last slide, would be you need to create an environment that is stable, consistent, and supportive. A kid needs to know what they're going to do during the day. They need to know what is going to happen on a daily basis, because when they don't, their emotions are going to be totally left unchecked. Another thing is going to be fostering emotional literacy. And I know that's kind of, psychology jargon, but really all that means is helping them understand their emotions. Because a lot of the time, a kid can't articulate what they're feeling because sometimes they just don't know. Sometimes all they know is that their face is hot, or sometimes all they know is they want to punch something. Sometimes all they know is their heart is beating really fast. And it can be really helpful if you can be able to draw out of them, oh, okay, you're feeling angry. And this is what it looks like for me when I'm angry. And this is what we can do about it when you're angry. Because when you can help a child become aware of what they're feeling, you can help them be able to regulate those feelings. So, fostering emotional literacy is another really, really great category to be able to instill. A third one is to give them strong boundaries. Like I was saying, where in your household, where in your schedule, where with your family is there a yes, and where is there a no? Where is there, hey, you can do this, and where is there, we do not allow this? Because ultimately, you're the parent, you're the guardian. You have to be the one setting the rules, not them, right? It can be really helpful to collaborate with a child and kind of get their opinion as far as what they might want to be a reward or what they might be okay with as far as discipline. But at the end of the day, you're the one who's setting the tone and you're the one who's calling the shots. So being able to have really clear lines in the sand for them is only going to be helpful to you. Kids don't realize it, but they crave boundaries. They love being able to know what is it that I can do and what is it that I cannot. And they're going to push those boundaries, of course, because we all did and they all will. And that's just a part of who we are as people, as humans. But that doesn't mean that they don't like it. Really, kids crave that stability and that consistency. So even if it is a rule, even if it is something that they don't necessarily like, they will understand that it is best for them, even if they're not able to articulate that when they're 7 years old, obviously. And then the fourth one would be to teach them coping skills. So coping skills as a therapist is something that I help teach really often. But a lot of the time, I will not just teach the kid, do it with them for an hour, 1 week, and then just leave them to their own devices. I will try to equip the parent and tell them, hey, this is what we worked on. I would like you to continue doing this at home. Because the reality is that you are with them much more than any other trusted adult, much more than any therapist, much more than any coach, uh, even more than teachers a lot of the time. And so the responsibility really is on you to be able to help them cope. And coping skills really are just the tools that we can give to kids in order to help them manage their stresses, right? So coping skills can take a lot of different forms. There's thousands upon thousands of coping skills. And odds are they probably already have some that are in place and they may not even realize it. The child who is soothed by a certain TV show, that can be a coping skill. Or a child who has a ton of energy and just needs to get out and play, that can be a coping skill. Deep breathing to be able to relax when they're feeling angry or anxious, that can be a really important coping skill. And I'll get into that a little bit later too. But as their parents, you don't need to rely on mental health professionals in order to teach coping skills. You're equipped to do that right now. And if you feel like you're doing it wrong, you're probably not, but you can always Google it. There's so many resources online, specifically about coping skills, that are all super, super helpful in being able to help kids manage those really big emotions. All right. So here are some examples from some of these four categories that I wanted to be able to give to you guys, just to kind of give you like a little head start or a little practical tools, just so that you have at least a little something to be able to go off of as you kind of create your own way to use and utilize this information. Creating a chore chart. Maybe that's not for like the 3 or 4 year olds if you have kids that young, but if you have kids who are more in the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 range, a chore chart can be really helpful for them in creating that consistency and that stability. It can also be a boundary because it instills the expectations of the household. They know exactly what is expected of them. A second one would be to update a family calendar regularly for them to see. I've seen this be really, really helpful with all sorts of kids, particularly kids who even have ADHD. These visual aids and these really routine structures can be so helpful in that regulation piece. Having a reward system can also be really helpful, because as much as we would love for kids to just do whatever we want them to do right off the bat with no ulterior motive, that's usually not the case. Sometimes kids just need incentive. Sometimes they just respond really well to getting a cookie if they do the right thing, or being able to pick out a toy when they go to Walmart, or going to McDonald's, or wherever it is that motivates them, right? There's nothing wrong with kids having a motivator. I would say you don't want to make this become the end all be all, and anything that you ask them to do, they expect to get whatever they want or to have some sort of reward, because there are certain things in life that are not rewarded, and that's a lesson that they need to learn. But maybe for some of the bigger things, or some of the things that are particularly hard to get them to do, whether that is chores or homework or whatever that may be, a reward system could be a good option. Posting house rules where they can see them can also be really helpful. Again, just because of that expectation piece, so that kids are never unaware of what their role is in the house, or what those boundaries really are. Boundaries can just be really important, especially, I'll skip one and then come back to the next one. Keeping your boundaries the same unless they absolutely need to change. There are some boundaries that can be a little bit more flexible, but all in all, you really want to keep them consistent so that they're not constantly pushing or constantly breaking the rules without even knowing it, because then trust is really going to be harder to come by in that way. Using a feelings chart can be really, really helpful as well when it comes to the emotional literacy, really understanding their own emotions. A feelings chart I've found to be really helpful with kids in therapy. I myself have a feelings chart. It's just like 8 by 10. It's laminated, and every single emotion comes with one of those emojis. So, on your phone, when you type in like one of the yellow smiley faces, they have like a million different emotions in those little cartoon characters. And so I have a feelings chart that will list all like 50 different emotions. And so a lot of the time, if a kid comes in and they're just struggling to articulate what they're feeling, or maybe they're all over the place and dysregulated, I'll have them pick whatever emotion they're feeling out. Because sometimes if you ask a kid, like, why are you doing that? Or like, how are you feeling? Like, what's going on? They might not have the words to tell you. they just might not understand. They might not know why it is that they're feeling this way, why they're so all over the place. And so having something for them to go off of can be really helpful for them to be able to name that feeling so that they're aware of what they're feeling so that they can then be able to regulate that feeling. So, point to the chart, they might say, like, oh, actually, I think I'm disappointed. Or, oh, yeah, I'm feeling really mad. I even have one next to the anger that says explosive so that it's like really, oh, there's not just mad, there's levels to that one emotion. There's levels to any emotion. And that really helps them become even more aware of what they might be feeling. Um, another one when we think about coping skills, from the category, the fourth category from the slide before, guiding them in deep breathing or progressive muscle relaxation. So deep breathing has shown to be extremely helpful, not just for kids, but for any human that has any kind of emotional dysregulation. And obviously, it can be pretty difficult to get, a young kid to be able to breathe deeply, especially if they're triggered by something. But it takes practice. It takes work. No client, regardless of the age, is going to have it right off the bat, right? So there are times where I will, as a therapist, tell a client's parent, hey, I want you to do these deep breathing exercises with them. And they'll come back the following week and be like, yeah, they didn't do it. They couldn't handle it. And I always try to encourage them, yeah, they're not going to have it right away. Like, they have to practice. This is an acquired skill. Like, this is going to take some work. But the more that they do it, the more that they will be able to regulate. And the more that they'll be able to use the coping skill to regulate even better. So yes, it's going to be hard at first, especially if they are, of the energetic or impulsive kind of personality characteristic, right? But the more that they're able to do it, the better it's going to get. In addition to the deep breathing, something that I found that can be even more helpful with those energetic, impulsive type of kids can be something called progressive muscle relaxation, which is really just a tense and release kind of activity where we'll just go through all the muscles in the body from our feet all the way up to our head, just tense it for 5 seconds and then release. And you're really breathing all throughout that. And I think they really latch on to this movement. Being able to regulate really starts in the body and then impacts the brain, not always the other way around. So being able to get some sort of movement, some sort of rhythm into your regulation coping skill can be super, super helpful. And then, of course, you as the parent are the tone setter. So if they are dysregulated, or you can sense that they are starting to become dysregulated, it's kind of on you to set the tone for that environment in order to be able to help lower the stress. And that's called co-regulating. So if a kid is becoming triggered or angry or starting to cry or starting to scream, starting to hit, it's going to be pretty important for you to not match their energy, to not escalate the problem, which of course is very difficult because their stress makes you stressed. But if you want any chance at that stress to come down at all, it's going to be important for you to help them regulate so that they can mirror your demeanor. This could be by keeping a really soft voice, by keeping a really open, gentle body language. The idea really is not to match their intensity, but for your intensity to be all the way down here so that they can start to come down. All right. So I also have a video for you guys from the perspective of children that I think is really enlightening. So I'm really hoping the sound works. Someone feel free to jump on and let me know if for some reason the sound is not working, and I will try to figure it out. But for now, let's watch the video.
I get really mad when my brother hits me a lot. I don't like it when you say you don't want to play with me. When I'm mad, my brain can get a headache and it can start hurting. Your blood keeps pumping because you're like really mad. And you start to get sweaty because you're getting really, really mad. And then when you start getting really mad, you turn red. When your body can't really control yourself, mad just takes over your body. I just get out of control. It's kind of like if you had a jar and then the jar would be your brain and then you put glitter in the jar and that would be how you would feel. If you shook up the jar and the glitter went everywhere, that would be how your mind looks. And it's like spinning around and then you don't have any time to think. And you sometimes punch stuff and people when you don't really mean it. When I get angry, I feel it in my heart. I really don't like when I get angry. The amygdala really reacts, but the prefrontal cortex tries to keep it down. When I feel like I want to, get really angry and yell, I just sometimes, take deep breaths. First you find a place where you can be alone. Then you find some way to relax and calm down. When I need to calm down, I take deep breaths. I breathe in through my nose. Sometimes I close my eyes or just take deep breaths. It's coming down, it's not moving. It's slowing down and then it stops. And the heart pumps slow and then it goes into your brain. It's like all the sparkles are at the bottom of your brain. My brain slows down and then I feel more calm and then I'm ready to speak to that person.
So I really like that video just because you kind of get that perspective from these kids about what it's like to be in their shoes. And I really love when the little girl talks about the glitter in the jar, that, their mind is like glitter in a jar, and then anger comes in and it's like it just shakes the jar. And then the glitter is just going every which way and circling around, and there's no control over it. And I think that was a really astute way of being able to describe their inner state when these emotions take over. And then all talking about just the power of being able to breathe, and an adult who will listen to them and be able to help them just talk about the way that they're feeling. I thought was just a really nice example of kind of what we're trying to get to, right? And these kids didn't become masters of regulation on their own. They had to be taught. So I hope that was encouraging to you and just give you a little bit of idea about what they're going through and what is possible.
I get really mad when my...
So the body impacts the brain. And this is a really important aspect of regulation that I wanted to make sure to cover, because I'm sure that many of you have dealt or experienced this before. You've tried to help a child get over whatever they're going through by appealing to their sense of logic. Like, oh, well, you wouldn't like that toy because of this or this, or no, you can't go hang out with this friend because of this or this, or you'll be fine with this homework project because of this or this. And I'm sure it makes logical sense, but they probably still had some sort of tantrum or meltdown anyway. Have you ever been there? Because that is, I'm sure, very, very frustrating. And the reason for that is because their stress is really embodied because of that brainstem, like we were talking about earlier, because of that midbrain. It's not in the part of the brain that makes sense to them. It's all just right here in the body. It's all in this tension that they feel and they just don't know how to get rid of. So being able to do that deep breathing, really starting the regulation in the body, it'll move its way up into their emotional part of their brain. The little girl even said amygdala, which is even more precise of a term for the brain than I mentioned, but it'll work its way up to there and they will be able to be calm. The calm and anxiety cannot exist in a person's brain or cannot be activated in a person's brain at the same time. If a child is calm, their anger or their anxiety response will be way, way low. They can't happen at the same time. So, this is why deep breathing or other body based activities, such as rhythm or play, can be so helpful and so effective. All right. So, kind of just to be able to wrap up, I wanted to make sure that I pointed you guys toward at least a couple of really practical resources. Right. So this is not an exhaustive list. This isn't everything that's out there. There's way, way more that I'm sure you'll be able to find or that is available to you. But I just wanted to find just a couple that I have found to be really helpful in my working with kids. So the first one is called Mad Dragon. It's a card game that's really tailored toward kids that struggle with anger, for kids of any kind who have emotion dysregulation, but it's really particularly helpful for kids that struggle with anger. It's a really fun game. They'll want to play it and it'll help them. There's also a game called the Stop, Relax, and Think. It's a board game, and they get to like move a pawn along a board. They get to pull cards, and it gives them prompts to be able to do all sorts of stuff. And so both of those games I've played with clients in therapy, and they've responded very well. If your kid is into YouTube, which I'm sure that they are because YouTube is everything for kids now, there's a YouTube channel called Go Noodle. I know a ton of teachers that use this um, in the classroom setting because, one teacher, 25 kids, a lot of the time it can be pretty difficult to really get a room full of amped up, sugared up children to actually, be able to regulate and behave. So Go Noodle is really useful because it really taps into the advantage of being able to help kids with movement, being able to help kids. Even there's deep breathing exercises with Go Noodle. There's all sorts of mindfulness, which is really like physical body and here and now awareness that they can help them with. So when we think about the rhythmic aspect of regulation, Go Noodle is really helpful. But there's a lot of other YouTube channels for kids that really focuses on mindfulness as well. There's also a book series by Diane Alber called the Little Spot book series. So when we think about emotional literacy, that category that I was going over, this series of books is really great. I found that a lot of kids really enjoy these books, and it very simply is able to teach them about a whole variety of emotions. For you guys, for parents, for guardians, for adults, I think two books that are really good are called Boundaries with Kids. This is by a couple of clinical psychologists, Cloud and Townsend. They really just lay out how to have healthy boundaries with your kids. So that's really helpful. And then this book is not for the faint of heart. So make sure that you have like a dictionary handy because there's definitely some big, difficult words in there. But if you're able to kind of work through that, there are some really, really great information in a book called The Whole Brain Child. That's by Daniel Siegel. Again, that's really if you're up for the challenge. The next one is an app for your phone. So unfortunately, it's only for iPhone right now because I think they're beta testing, but it is available if you have an iPhone. It's called the Sizu app. And this is really geared more toward teens and young adults, but it could totally work with elementary school kids as well. It gives you all sorts of breathing exercises, mindfulness exercises, grounding techniques, and other things. And it's very interactive and kind of guides you through those. So almost more of a family thing, that one could be. And then finally, there's us here at Nexus. We have tons of resources for you. We have several therapists. We have parenting classes like this one. We have a program called Common Ground, which is a parent teenager communication workshop. And then we also have youth advocates that stay connected to students who just need a little bit of extra support. So those are just some, really just touching the iceberg for all the different resources that are available to you. But I'm going to stop sharing now because my PowerPoint is at an end. But I just hope that at least some of that information was useful to you. Hope it was informative. Hope that you guys got at least one or two practical tools from it. And I know what you guys are going through. I know that parenting is really challenging. So I hope that you know that we're here for you. And I think I'm going to turn it back over to Spencer now, because I'm just about done.
All right. Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate it. Can you make me the host again, please? So I can go ahead and do that. Thank you. Also, it looks like we have a question in the chat from Lisa here. It says, can you give me some tips for a child who has tantrums? I'm struggling with how to deal with this. So you could answer that question for her if you have an answer.
Yes. How do I make you host again? Oh, wait. Make host.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think, every child is different. So I'd love to know a little bit more about the situation or kind of what tantrums look like for them. But I think, part of what I was talking about was kind of almost starting with understanding that, tantrums are going to happen and there's nothing wrong with you or with the kid as a result of that. So I hope you're not like down on yourself for that happening. But if it's happening frequently, if it's happening more often than you want, and it's really starting to just make life difficult for all of you, then I would definitely start with kind of just taking a look at the environment that they're in and just kind of seeing like, okay, do we have consistency at home as far as the schedule, as far as chore chart, clear boundaries for them? Do I have some sort of reward system for them? Could be really helpful. And then have you done any kind of like coping skills for them at home? If you're in the store and the tantrum starts happening, a lot of the time you might just have to ride that out. But if they are responsive to your co-regulating and you having a very soft tone, kind of letting them get their emotions out before trying to kind of help them understand what they're feeling, and that could be helpful. But yeah, I'd love to be able to talk with you offline if that's something that you want to talk about, to kind of understand the full picture. Because it's easy to give the cookie cutter general information that I gave from my PowerPoint, but without knowing your full situation, can't really give as much useful information as possible.
Hey, Nathan, quick question. Would you be willing to put your work email here in the chat for anybody that have any questions for you? If they
Absolutely.
wanted to ask like a more personalized question,
Totally. Yeah.
that would be amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. So feel free, I think it was Lisa. Yeah, feel free to email me if you want to tell me a little bit more about your child and just kind of what they're going through. And I'd love to be able to brainstorm with you.
Awesome. Thank you for doing that, Nathan.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions? before we let everybody go for the evening? Alrighty. I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and listening to our presentation here from Nathan Cardover. We really appreciate you, Nathan, coming and presenting for us.
Yeah.
We hope you guys learned something new tonight, got some new information, and we hope you all have a happy new year. Have a great night, everybody.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me.